Over half the world's fisheries are already fully exploited, while almost a third are being overfished. So better management and conservation of fish stocks is needed urgently, while at the same time still providing the seafood people need to eat. Successfully meeting this dual demand are fisheries improvement projects, known as FIPs. These projects are specifically designed to improve the management of fisheries while still keeping the seafood products in the supply chain.
The starting point, if you will, for our work is to understand what's going on in all these fisheries. What's the status of the fisheries? So that's the first piece. Once we understand the status, we can see where the problems are. The next piece of our work is then to identify some options for improving the fisheries. Given the problems, what kind of actions do we need to take? And then we start looking at the supply chain and asking which companies can we engage in helping us make those improvements. And we will start to form what we call a fisheries improvement partnership. So we would bring in these different suppliers, start explaining the issues to them, and trying to build a consensus around an action plan or a work plan to implement over the next year or two. And once we have that agreement, we also try and create an institution, if you will, a new entity that usually has catch sector interests at heart and processor interests to run the fishery improvement project in the long term.
Retailers often require seafood which is certified as sustainably sourced, but many fisheries don't reach the required standard. This means that fishermen can lose customers, and supermarkets cannot get the range of products they want to sell. What FIPs do is help both sides. Fisheries can keep supplying retailers on condition that improvements are made, while retailers' reputations are protected, as their suppliers are now on the road to sustainability, and future seafood stocks are more secure. For FIPs to succeed, there have to be some key elements in place. There has to be an inclusive alliance of all groups concerned: seafood buyers, retailers, processors, suppliers, producers, and NGOs with an interest in the specific fishery. Reliable data on the state of the fishery must be gathered. The alliance has to agree and implement a practical and achievable action plan based on the data, usually including tackling issues such as illegal fishing, bycatch, and environmental impacts. The alliance and action plan has to be public and transparent as proof of the project's openness and credibility. And the improvements in the fishery have to be scientifically monitored with a commitment to make further changes if needed. With many fisheries in developed countries now recovering, a new challenge lies in the waters of developing nations.
When you go to a country like Indonesia, there is not a single fish stock that gets an annual stock assessment. Not one. There's no central database of fish landings. Nothing. So you're starting from a baseline that's so much lower than what we have in countries like the US or the UK. The challenges are much greater. What we ask of these fisheries has to correspond to that reality. We can't say we're going to hold you to this global standard that applies in North America. You're in Indonesia. You've got to help the fisheries. It's going to take 10 years to get to the point where they can clarify and know where they're, exactly how much fishing is going on, what they're catching, and have good stock assessments and assessments of this, of other impacts that they're having on the marine environment.
The blue swimming crab is worth about $300 million to the economies of Indonesia and the Philippines, and is a key ingredient for major processing companies like Phillips Foods in the U.S. Operated by thousands of small-scale fishermen, this unregulated fishery became popular as a substitute for declining Chesapeake Bay blue crab stocks, but soon became overfished and in need of urgent action. Processors and exporters formed an association with help from SFP and support from the World Bank and the NFI Crab Council. The alliance tackled the problems of bycatch, protected nursery areas, regulated mesh sizes and other fishing gear, and introduced a coordinated hatchery program. Blue swimming crab is now one of the first FIPs in Indonesia, a successful template for others to follow.
I believe FIP approach works in Indonesia. In my experience, it works through a very clear message from the buyers in the US, Europe, or Australia to their suppliers, to their producers, that they need to work in improving their fisheries. And then when the message is clear and loud to their producers, then they then either get together with their partners, or even some of them with their competitors, to actually develop a sensible work plan with a clear timeline and a budget.
We started by running FIPs to create models of success, and we started approximately 50 fishery improvement projects worldwide. Some other NGOs were involved in starting their own as well, and together we probably had about 80 fishery improvement projects worldwide. A few years ago, we started transitioning leadership in our projects to industry and started looking at adding some new projects, and we've added another 10 or 20 ourselves in the last couple of years. But the big change has come from the way we've set up the Fisheries Improvement Project. You don't need SFP, Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, or an NGO to start a Fisheries Improvement Project. We have made all of our tools, all our information fully transparent. Anybody around the world who wants to start one of these projects can do so on their own, whether they're a catcher, a processor, an exporter, or a local NGO. And we're aware of over 100 of these projects that are now running worldwide.
There is no common target for FIPs. Each project sets its own goal, and SFP supports all improvement through advice and information. If you are interested in creating or joining a fishery improvement project, please contact us at info@sustainablefish.org.